I have my paper set up. I have my printed photo. Again, the printed photo does not have to be in color. If you only have black and white, it's fine. You can always use a color reference from looking at your screen in order to figure out the color scheme that you need. You just need a printed photo to make the transfer. Okay? So again, we're going to transfer one contour line drawing here for a rough, one contour line drawing here for a final. All right, but before we do that, I want you to take your piece of Cerl paper, and again, the Cerl paper is brand new, so that means that if you touch it on one of the two sides, right, you got two sides here, you got the really, really dark side and the slightly lighter side. This is full of graphite, all right, just a soft, powdery graphite. What you need to think about here is you're going to need to take a little bit of time and take some of this off, because if you press too hard, when I lay this down on top of my photo, this graphite is going to be really, really dark. So what that means is when I transfer a dark graphite line, let's say I'm tracing the teeth, and I don't have a lot of dark lines in between the teeth. When I go to transfer that, there's going to be lines there that I don't want. Okay? So what you need to do first is you're going to want to take a little bit of the graphite off of the darker side of this by just using a tissue. All right, so again, there's the light side and the dark side. Take a tissue, take a little bit of the graphite off of this side. You see that streak that it makes? All right, you can see how it's starting to come off on the tissue. We don't want dark lines when we're dealing with our watercolor, right? Because especially if we're looking at areas of light against light value, we don't want it to be too dark. So I'm just trying to take a little bit off just by kind of going over, some of the darker areas here. And then I'm just going to I want to take my photo, and I want to take my paper so I can set up the rough and the final. And I want to, again, look at where the printed edge here is, and I can kind of see enough. I can see enough through the printed version that if I center it, right, I can see the tape here and I can see the tape here. And maybe I want to move it, I want to move this down to the edge of the blue tape at the bottom. So I want to move the edge of the printed photo down to the edge at the bottom here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a small piece of blue tape. I'm going to line it up here at the top. And now I'm going to take my piece of Cerl paper. Okay, this was the dark side that I just wiped some of the information off. This is the light side. I'm just going to lift this up and slide it underneath. Now, yours should be wide enough to cover the whole space. All right, mine is. So I'm just going to then just set that in and lay it down. And now I'm going to start to transfer all the information lightly. All right, again, if you press too hard, it's going to do two things. It's going to make a dent in the paper, which we don't want, right? So that way paint ends up not being able to go down inside that scored area. So with the graphite paper, let me show you what's going to happen. Some of you guys remember this. We used the Cerl paper last year. If I trail along here, right, this area of highlight, if I lift up the Cerl paper, I can see that pencil line right here. Okay? I'm not pressing hard. We took some of the graphite off so that it doesn't transfer too dark. All right? So now what I want you to do, and what you need to do, is go over all of the areas of shape. I'm not going to go over every one of these lines in the hat. I'm going to do that individually when I get to the paint. All right? So I'm just with light to medium pressure following the contour. Okay, so here I do have a little bit of this, and I've got the highlight on the top of the hat. Again, I told you I was editing out this area. Now, I need to make two lines here that show me the thickness of the hat. And I'm going to show you what's happening momentarily. All right, so I've got that far. Now I can lift up, and you can see the light lines created. And even if that's really, really light, like you see it is there, that's fine. I'd rather have lighter lines than all kinds of smudges. So that's why I asked you to take some of the graphite off of the Cerl paper. Now, one thing to really, really be aware of, when you get into the eyes, the nose, the mouth, all right, make sure that you're looking at those specific details like we talked about before. So when I go into doing the eyes here, all right, I really want to focus on a few specific things. One is the area of highlight. Let me see if I can bring some light down on this. There we go. And I need to remember what we learned about the shape of the eyes, as well as the upper eyelid crease and the values created by the lower eyelid. Okay. And then again, I can see some of the darks and lights. And when I do the eyebrow here again, I don't want to make it too dark and too solid. All right, I just want to kind of look at the contour shapes created by the variations of lights and darks, as well as the areas, and this is what I was talking about. If you don't have a good quality photo, I'm not going to be able to see these subtle variations. Like here's the highlight on the eye, and here's the pupil, and here's the shape of the upper eyelid, and here's the upper eyelid crease, and here's the area of shadow that creates that upper eyelid. So you can see that zigzag line, that's kind of the shadow created by the eyelash, right? And then the cornea, the nose, and I have some smile lines here that are going to create a little bit of value. So you can see where I've got so far is that didn't really transfer all that much. These really dark spots are where my fingers were when I was transferring that information. So I need to go back, maybe change or move the placement of the Cerl paper, and then go back in and double check to make sure, all right, that it's working. So again, you need to double check. You need to kind of follow along. So now if I move the Cerl paper out of the way, now I can see that I've got a little bit more accuracy in the representation of this eye. And I might need a little bit more in the accuracy in the representation of that eye. All right? So I'm going to keep going with this and get this one whole transferred. Then I'm going to look and see if there was any mistakes that I made on this side. Then when I'm going to transfer it again on this side, this is going to be my final. Okay? All right, so I'm going to continue transferring all the contours, and that again significantly has to do with any edge of separation and value. So the looseness along the shape of the jaw and the shape of the hair. I can keep this a little bit lighter, and I want to again look at the hair as a series of layers, not as a series of individual strands. Don't get stuck. Okay, look at the major areas of separation. Oops. Look at the major areas of separation. Here's the shadow on the neck, and some of that's created by this area of hair. I've got the area of the shirt. Right, I got this interesting shape of the sunglasses. I'm going to edit that out and just make the shirt kind of continue down there. All right. So I've got this separation here. Let's see how that's starting to look. Okay, so you can see what I've got so far. I've got some of those variations and separation. So if I took too much off of the Cerl paper, I'm not going to see anything. But I can see a little bit of lightness right here. See a little bit of lightness right here, where that's going to help me be able to see. Okay, you can kind of see it if I zoom out a little bit, right? You can see both eyes, you can see the shape of the jaw, shape of the sides of the cheeks, and then I'm going to continue in on the areas of the hair here, so I don't lose the detail. Right, I got some values in here on the curve of the neck, and even though these are individual strands of hair, I'm going to look for the large areas of value. Okay, I'm going to look for the large areas of light and dark, and just press down. But again, make sure you're checking, and this is what we did before. All right, this is what we did before in the hair studies, which you should have turned in. Just looking at the areas of value. So I've got light areas of hair, I've got dark areas of hair, dark areas, light areas. Okay, find a way to look at those areas of light and dark values in the texture of the hair, so that when you go and paint it in, right, I can see some semblance of where the light and dark values are inside the hair. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back in here. You're going to need to move this around a little bit. I didn't really see all that much of the nose shape, so I'm going to go back in. Okay, I can see that just made a little bit of a hole right there, but now I've got a more accurate representation of the nose. And again, take your time and be careful with the mouth shape. All right? Look for just the areas of light and dark. In this case, I don't have a really sharp shape on the upper lip, but what I do have is how the upper lip relates to the shape of the teeth, and then I've got that dark edge there. And again, always look to show the representation of the area around the teeth. All right, the bottom lip does not have a very distinct edge separation here. In fact, it has a highlight. So I'm going to make a broken line here and draw that little bit of a curve where the shadow is here. I've already got this set up here. And this is going to create a broken line here. So more accurately, what I end up with, the shape of the lip, when I look at the mouth, is I have a much more accurate representation. Okay, and you can see where I have those edges of separation created, where I have those lines. And this is why I was really specific about what subjects you guys were using, because you can see once I get to the graphite transfer, you know, not everything shows up as neatly and cleanly as you'd imagine. Right, I got these smudgy areas over here, which obviously before I start shading, or before I start watercoloring, I'm going to want to erase. But again, this is my rough, so I'm okay with some of that information, you know, being a little bit skewed or messed up, where I have my, you know, my Cerl paper and I wiped off some of the graphite on this side. All right, so once I get finished with this side, once you get finished with this side, move it over to this side. And again, let me just bring this up a little bit. Okay. Line this up so that it's as close as you can get it to the edge here. And the edge there. Along even with the bottom, or close enough to the bottom. And then just press the tape down there. And now I'm just, you can see kind of where I did the other lines on the Cerl paper. I can see the lines that I made. I'm just going to flip the Cerl paper over. I'm going to do the same transfer here on the final side, so that when I start to paint, all right, I'm doing the same exact thing. This is just going to give you a little bit more practice on shading, because again, you guys have to really look at what you're seeing in order to accurately recreate what you're looking at from the reference photo. So the better your transfer is, and I'm going to leave it taped down, because let's say I stop to check, double check, okay, there I go. I've got the eyes set up where I need them to be. I'm going to continue to transfer this onto the final area. And the next demonstration is obviously going to have a lot more to do with what we see as far as starting to set up the watercolor practice and the base wash layers. Again, this photo is just for the transfer portion, just to be able to draw on top, just so that I know that I'm going to have all the pertinent information that I need, so that when I start painting, I'll have more accuracy in looking at the shapes of what's around the teeth and around the areas of value based on our overall contour. So double check it every once in a while. Stop and look and lift and see that you're transferring what you need. Okay? All right. So I went through all the detail areas, went through some of the secondary information with the shape of the hair, areas of value, obviously. And you can see how well marked up the printed photo is. That's okay. I also, at certain points, had to move the Cerl paper because I'd lift it up and I'd check to see if what I needed was actually there. All right, and again, this is why the clarity of the photo matters. I'm going to take my Cerl paper out, move it out of the way. If I lift this up, this is why the clarity of the photo matters. If you don't have a good, clear photo in here, you're not going to be able to see the detail in here. Based on the size that we're working on here, right, this is a very, very small area, okay, similar to what you're doing with the hair right now. And you can see I've got these areas of smudges over here, and that's just from where I was holding down the Cerl paper. So I can always go back, and that's a good thing because this is on my rough. And even still, on my rough here, this is a dark area. So most likely the watercolor is going to cover over that information in there. But you can see I've got a basic kind of setup on the rough, and now if I move the photo reference, or at least the transfer reference, out of the way, I've got a much more detailed representation of the subject here on my final, and where my final is going to be applied. So from here, I'm going to start with my watercolor setup, start developing my skin tones, but I'm going to practice it over here. I'm not going to touch any part of this portion of my assignment until I've figured it out over on this side.